What's going on, Dante's Boxing Nation? So, last night was a very exciting, entertaining, breathtaking night of boxing. I was very entertained. I had a lot of fun watching the fights last night. Of course, the main event, had you on your seat. It was pretty. It was a good fight, man. It was a really good fight. But before I get into the Bradley versus Provodnikov fight, I want to talk a little bit about Jesse Vargas versus Omatoso. It's funny because I was just talking about this in my last fight. In my last video with Trout versus Canelo. I talk about how the heart and the brain is always having a conversation, an argument, a debate, right? And sometimes when that heart wins, it makes you make a lot of mistakes because you're not thinking anymore. You run into punches, you mess around and you get knocked out sometime just because you weren't thinking and you were fighting with all heart. I think both Jesse Vargas and Tim Bradley, they were both a victim of that last night. Far more worse for Bradley, but still the fact is both of these guys, they had too much heart for their own good. They didn't want to use any brain, any intelligence. They both wanted to prove something. Jesse Vargas went in there against Omatoso. Omatoso, he was nowhere near on the level of boxing ability that Jesse was on. You can just tell just looking at him that Jesse had a better amateur pedigree as far as I'm concerned. He was just a better fighter, boxing-wise, intelligent-wise. He was killing Omatoso with the jab when he used it. But it wasn't until Jesse Vargas, he would taste a little blood, or he just felt he had something to prove because he knew that Omatoso was the bigger puncher. He knew he was naturally bigger, and Vargas's heart, he couldn't refuse what his heart wanted to do, right? And like I said, that almost got Vargas knocked out. He got knocked down, he got hurt real bad, and he got knocked down. And, and like I said, every single time he tried to go toe-to-toe, with Omatoso, he had problems. Jesse Vargas is a decent fighter, not a real good fighter. He's a decent fighter. He has a great offense. He does not have that much of a good defense. When you see him punching and throwing combinations, he almost looks like a flawless fighter. But then when you see the incoming in all the punches that he receives, that's when you see his flaws, right? So I have to be honest. I don't really see Jesse Vargas going extremely far. Depending on what type of opponents that he faces, but he's really got to work on his head movement. He has no head movement at all. The African guy, Omatoso. The thing with Omatoso is. And, not to stereotype too much, but I think I can in this situation because it's basically true. A lot of the African fighters, particularly the ones from Nigeria, a lot of them fight really, really aggressive, but a lot of them fight wild, telegraphing punches, wild hooks and right hands. And that's, if Omatoso was throwing those right hands straight instead of, kind of wild, he probably would have knocked out Jesse Vargas. But he was just a wild banger, and Jesse Vargas gave Omatoso, as many chances as he possibly could. But Omatoso, he couldn't capitalize off of it. So, like I said, if Jesse would have just boxed and he would have kept his mind right, and he would have, fought a disciplined fight, I think he would have boxed circles around Omatoso. Okay? So that's really all I have to say about that fight. Now, I also want to go ahead and get into the main event, of course, right? So Bradley. Boy, oh boy. I'm going to tell you, man, Bradley is something else, guys. This guy is something else. I mean, what Bradley did last night, as far as I'm concerned, he almost made Brandon Rios look like he was a boxer. I mean, it was just blood and guts from both Bradley and Provodnikov, but it's not as impressive with Ruslan because we already know that he only has one gear and he fights that way. Tim Bradley, here's a man you had who was outgunned. You know, it's already impressive when you got two bangers going toe to toe, right? But when you have two bangers going toe to toe and one fighter has a lot less, natural power than the other guy, that makes it even more impressive, because he knows he doesn't hit us anywhere near as hard as this guy, but he's still willing to go in there and go toe to toe. And if he's going to go out, he's willing to go out on his shield, right? So, that's what Tim Bradley showed. He showed blood and guts. You could tell Tim Bradley, he wanted to put on a performance. He wanted to, basically prove to the naysayers that he had power. He wanted to prove that he could fight toe to toe, et cetera, et cetera. And he thought that Ruslan, Provodnikov was the best opponent to do it against. But me personally, I really question if Tim Bradley psychologically is okay right now. I talked to somebody a couple months back, one of my boxing buddies, a couple months back, and I was a little concerned about Bradley. I was telling one of my buddies who watched boxing as well. I was like, man, I don't know, man. I hope Tim Bradley don't end up, committing suicide and killing himself, because the backlash that he received from the Pacquiao fight is something that has never that I don't think any boxer has dealt with. Okay, I mean, you guys have to understand something. This is the new millennium. When you guys think of all of the robberies that have taken place in boxing, think about it. There are thousands and thousands of fighters who have gotten robbed before. Can you recall ever a time in the history of boxing where the guy who got the gift decision started receiving death threats? His family, he's almost afraid to come outside, to bring his family out, because he's afraid that him or his family is going to get harmed. And obviously it becomes something way deeper than boxing when something like this, occurs, right? So, I can't think of anyone, dealing with this situation. I remember when Lennox Lewis got robbed against Evander Holyfield, the critics and the media and the fans, they all went after the judges, right? They went after the judges. They didn't really go after Evander Holyfield, right? But in this situation right here, because of the type of star power that Manny Pacquiao generates, because he is such a freaking icon, it really, and people did not want Tim Bradley to beat Pacquiao. And I said this in a lot of my videos before, and a lot of you guys who watch my videos, you understand where I'm coming from when I say this. A lot of fans, they did not want to see Tim Bradley beat Pacquiao, right? It could have been anyone else. As long as it wasn't Floyd Mayweather or Tim Bradley, they didn't care if Marquez beat him. They didn't care if Marquez beat him. As long as someone like, let's keep it real. Let's be realistic about it. A lot of people did not want to see a black fighter beat Manny Pacquiao, right? And it was disdain, and it was out of malice the way they treated Tim Bradley, when he took that victory. Like I said, robbery, cry robbery, that's fine. If you want to say it's a robbery, if you want to say your man Manny Pacquiao won, that's all fine. But death threats, are you serious, guys? Death threats. When a man has a family, little kids, and a wife, and death threats. Come on, guys. We're not even talking about robberies in boxing anymore, right? So, Tim Bradley, a guy who had to fight as hard as he possibly could his whole life to get to where he is today. Tim Bradley is basically the Clubber Lang of Rocky. He was this man who was always training hard, was always hungry, always wanted it. And as soon as he got it, it came with probably the worst backlash in the history of boxing. So I think that played a big part of the way, Tim Bradley looked. And quite frankly, you combine that with a 10-month layoff, and who knows, man? I don't even know if Tim Bradley can recover psychologically from what happened with the Pacquiao situation. And on top of that, you look at the situation that now, Tim Bradley, he received so much punishment in that fight with Provodnikov. He received a lot of punishment that may affect his future. You know, the thing with Bradley is, and this is something I've always touched on, Bradley was one of those, few fighters who can adjust to, getting caught with the same punch over and over. When he fought against Kendall Holt, I think Kendall Holt caught him with, a right hook, whichever hook it was. And, after he hurt Tim Bradley with that fight, he hardly ever landed that punch again. You go back, you watch the Manny Pacquiao fight. After about the third, fourth round, Manny Pacquiao seldomly ever hit Tim Bradley with that left straight hand. In the Provodnikov fight, for whatever reason, Tim Bradley, he could not adjust to that overhand right. He was getting caught with that overhand right over and over and over again. And that was when I was looking at the fight, like, wow, this is interesting, because I have never seen Bradley get caught with the same punch over and over again. Realistically, guys, I believe that Tim Bradley, he could have, when he got hurt in that first round, it could be possible that Tim Bradley never recovered from that first round. He could have just been fighting while he was basically halfway out of it for the whole fight. Because I've heard fighters, popular fighters, actually say, after they got knocked down, I don't remember who it was, but I'm not gonna say a name because I don't remember who it was. But I remember a boxer, he was talking in an interview, after the fight, because he had got knocked down, and he said that after I got knocked down, I don't even remember the last 4 rounds. He said that. So, that could have something to do with why Tim Bradley, he was bouncing around the ring, but he wasn't moving his head at all. It was like, it wasn't the Tim Bradley, that always is constantly moving their head. And you guys can go back and watch some of my videos on my original channel, Dante562. And you could see on the I think the video that I did, Tim Bradley, Manny Pacquiao, and the punch stats, I show clips of his head movement and all of that. But anyway, yeah, man. So it could be possible that Bradley just didn't recover from the first round. The guy has so much heart. Tim Bradley, he was basically fighting while he was out on his feet. He was still fighting. But the good news with all of this, stuff is now I can guarantee you fighters like Manny Pacquiao, who was making a zillion excuses of why he didn't want to fight in a rematch, I can almost guarantee you Pacquiao has no problem fighting him in a rematch. Marquez's trainer, Nacho Berestein, he was making over 101 excuses. Oh, Bradley is boring. Bradley is a stinky, boring fighter, etc., etc. I bet you after last night, you won't be calling him boring anymore, right? That will be the last thing you can call Bradley, okay? The last thing you can call Bradley is a boring fighter who has no heart, because you would know instantly that you would be lying, right? So, guys, like I said, the bad news for this situation is Bradley, he took tremendous punishment. He may or may not ever be the same because of the punishment and the combination of the backlash of the controversy with Pacquiao. The good news is this will bring fighters out of the woodworks. Fighters were afraid to fight Tim Bradley. He showed just enough vulnerability for a lot of opponents to come out and try to take him out. I would not, even Brandon Rios, I wouldn't be surprised if Brandon Rios, who was also ducking Bradley, I wouldn't be surprised if he, would be anxious to fight Tim Bradley now. And realistically, depending on how much damaged goods Bradley is, Brandon Rios might have a chance to actually win that fight now. I would have never said that against a Tim Bradley prior to the Manny Pacquiao fight. But now, who knows, man? Who knows? So, yeah, man, it was an exciting, great fight. I really enjoyed it. And, let's see if Tim Bradley can recover. He's either going to swim or drown. As far as I'm concerned, in his next fight, he's either going to look sensational or he's going to get knocked out. It's no in between. That's the way I see it right now. I'm really curious to see if Tim Bradley is himself again after a war like that. And like I said, let's see if Tim Bradley gets the same credit that Brandon Rios, got against Mike Alvarado. I highly doubt that he would. Of course, Jim Lampley didn't give him that type of, credit. Of course, he said it was a great fight a couple times. But, people who watch my channel, you guys already know what time it is. So I'm going to leave that at that, right? So anyway, guys, I'll probably talk a little bit more about this. That's really all I got to say about this fight. And I'll catch up with you guys. I'm on to the next one.